So you all know, if you watched the last video, that I paid €112,000 for my neglected Italian farmhouse in La Marche in central Italy. The question I got asked was, well, how much is it going to cost to renovate it? In today's video, I'm going to reveal my renovation budget. What will it cost to transform my house from this to this? I've got a bit of an admission to make. I'm actually a UK-based construction consultant, so I've been pricing building work, albeit in the UK, not in Italy, for almost 40 years. The downside of that is that my standards are pretty high. I'm used to working on building sites where we aim for very, very high standards. So my practical skills are nowhere near that level. So this is not a DIY budget. It's not a DIY video. I want to, to match the levels that I'm used to. How I've done this is I've costed the two-storey part of the house separately to the single-storey part of the house, mainly because the two-storey part is a refurbishment. The single-storey part might be a bit more than that. All the prices quoted are in euros, and at the end of the video, I will show you what those figures are in American dollars and British pounds. So I've got my bits of paper here. So if we start in the two-storey part of the house, and we'll start with what I've called builder's work. So that will include all the strip outs, all the internal alterations, of which there are a few. I want to relocate the staircase with some walls to come down, some new walls to build, doorways to block up, doorways to form, all the usual stuff you have in a renovation. I've called that builder's work. The total cost of that element I've allowed is €13,580. The second element I've got here are the floor structures, both ground and first. So to the ground floor, we have to install a damp-proof membrane. We will then have to insulate that floor, and I've included here for installing underfloor heating with an overlay system. So the first floor, the floors are slightly out of level, so we're going to level the floors as best we can and install underfloor heating to the first floor area. The total cost for doing all that work is €27,875. Now in the relocated staircase, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do there, so I've allowed a sum of €6,500. Moving on to the tidying up of the externals, so I've allowed to basically patch up the existing render because I'm not too bothered if it's a bit rustic looking because it's a farmhouse. There's a little bit of work to do to the roof, mainly some slipped tiles, some broken tiles, nothing major. But to do that work, the walls and the roof, I've allowed €9,540. The next element is the windows and external doors to the two-storey house only. So looking at the windows, again, some of them are quite new because they're double glazed. So I'm going to retain those, they're in good order. I'm going to replace the old wooden front doors on the east elevation with new glass French doors, and we're going to have new shutters because the old ones are pretty rotten. So the amount of money I've allowed for that is €18,735. Moving back inside, the big two items here will be the plumbing and heating and the electrical. So first of all, the plumbing and heating. Pretty certain I'm going to go down the route of a ground source heat pump, mainly because I can use it for cooling and heating. So I've got plumbing and heating, which is the air source heat pump, the hot water system, all the sanitary ware to the bathrooms, connections to kitchens and utility rooms. This comes out to €41,500. Then the electrical installation, so I've allowed for fully rewiring it. I'm not going to go mad, I'm going to keep it fairly simple. I've got a figure of €19,530. Moving on then to plastering. I've allowed for taking off all the plaster in the house. Some walls I might try to leave exposed depending on what we find. External walls I've allowed for insulating, and ceilings I've allowed for insulating. They're open ceilings at first floor level, so they'll all be insulated to minimise heat loss. So the total amount I've got in for plastering, only the two-storey element, £28,780. Then moving on to joinery, it will be new doors and frames throughout, new skirtings, new architraves, new boxings, whole new joinery package. So I've allowed a figure of €19,700. So then we move on to floor finishes. Obviously in Italy there are lots of tile manufacturers. I've been to see a couple, so I can get very good prices on floor tiles. So I've got a total of €16,800. Then we have wall tiling, so tiling to bathrooms, €8,399. And the last item there in the two-storey element is decorating. It'll just be emulsion paint throughout, and I've allowed a figure of €8,005. So then moving on to the single story extension. So starting with the substructure, which is new foundations, new floor slab, insulation, underfloor heating and is screed. I've got the total of 10,738. Then we have the superstructure. So we have masonry, render and paint. So I've allowed a figure of €14,654. I've also then allowed a provisional amount of €10,000 for steelwork in that extension, because that first floor will have to be supported by steelwork. I've no design on that yet, but from my experience, €10,000 should be ample. Once the steel work's in, we've got to construct a flat roof with a membrane and insulation on top. It's what we would call a warm roof, and I've got the total of €5,600. And then, in addition, to tile it to form the roof terrace, I've got €2,200. Around the perimeter of the roof terrace, I've allowed a glass balustrade. I've got €2,250. Quite a big expense here in the single story bit is the aluminium glazing. So the single story will be new aluminium glazing to make it look different to the existing original house. I think it'll look good. It'll separate the new from the old. 2 big sliding doors will be expensive. So I've allowed for the 2 sliding doors, 1 window and 1 roof light, all in aluminium, the amount of €21,480. We've then got to plaster the single story room. So I've allowed a cost there for the ceiling and in effect 4 walls. So to plaster that out, I've allowed the amount of €2,650. In addition to that, we'll have some sundry joinery in there, maybe some skirtings, maybe some boxings, and for that I've allowed the sum of €2,000. That area, because it's going to be the kitchen, will no doubt be tiled. I've allowed €4,480. Then moving on to the kitchen will be in there. It's not going to be a huge kitchen, it's going to be a bank of units on the back wall and an island. I've allowed is €20,100. Then the decorating for the single story area, again emulsion paint throughout, so I've allowed €1,008. So the big reveal, when you add all those numbers together, excluding a pool, which I would like, and the garden, which I will do myself with my son, so excluding those items, the renovation budget for the house and the single story extension is €315,105. So there we go. What do you think? Is it more than you thought, less than you thought? You think it's too much? Does it seem high to you? Is it worth it? I don't know. I'd be interested to know your thoughts, so please leave any comments, give your view. Is it too much? I mean, that will stand me then at €315,000 plus €112 I paid to buy it, at about €440,000 for a completed house, without the pool, without the garden, but a completed house. So the bigger question is, how do I manage a renovation like this? I'm in a country I've never lived in before. I don't speak the language fantastically. The regulations are different to the regulations I'm used to in the UK. So it's going to be a challenge, a big challenge. But next time I'll reveal my plans, not only for what I plan to do with this house, but what I plan to do with my time in Italy while I'm there working. So thank you again for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Please, could I ask you to subscribe? With my last video, at the time I'm videoing this, there was about 22,000 views, but 98% of you were not subscribed. So really, it really helps the channel in so many ways. Helps me if you would please subscribe. It doesn't cost you. Keep in touch with the journey. I've got lots and lots of exciting things planned for this channel this year. So please, if you don't mind, please subscribe. That would be really good. So see you all in the next video. Ciao, ciao.